The last couple days, we've been talking about spiritual gifts and how that God has graciously given them to all of us. We've talked about some of the roles, some of the way those gifts are manifested in the church. And again, this is all part of God's plan for the growth of corporate maturity in the church. The whole purpose is to build up the church as a whole and you and I as individual believers. And our verse, as we continue in Ephesians 4 at verse 13, is, until all of us come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to maturity, to the measure of the full stature of Christ. For those of you who may have heard my sermon on Sunday, you may recall that I used as an example or an illustration talking about how most of us have a wall or a door frame where we mark the growth of our children or grandchildren, and how children can see themselves growing through the years until they stop growing taller. And then I talked about measuring ourselves against Jesus and how do we measure up compared to being mature to the full stature of Christ. Most of us still have some room to grow. But I really think that is a great standard for all of us to keep in mind and to remember and to be pursuing. That we don't, just like a child doesn't want to stay the same height that she or he is when they're 5 or 6 years old, they want to keep getting taller. In the same way, the longer we follow Jesus, the more, hopefully, we are resembling him and speaking like him and acting like him and treating people like Jesus did. And so that image of to maturity, to the measure of the full stature of Christ, I hope that can really be kind of a motivating image for you as well as for myself, that we never want to get complacent. We never want to think we've arrived at a level of Christianity that is now okay or acceptable, or I've learned enough, I've grown enough, I'm good where I am. We want to maintain a spiritual hunger that encourages us to keep on growing. And part of how we do this, as I said in my sermon Sunday, is engaging in the practices and habits that Jesus did. Spiritual disciplines like prayer and hearing or reading God's word, worshiping, taking time in solitude and silence, or fasting and worship, service. All those sorts of disciplines are ways that we help to put ourselves in the position where God's grace can continue to work on our heart and our spirit and help us to keep growing. And really, every interaction that we have with another person is a chance for us to demonstrate our spiritual maturity and to keep growing in it. Whether it's an encounter that requires us to demonstrate love or patience or kindness or gentleness or self-control, every single encounter and interaction we have, it's really a spiritual school for growing in spiritual maturity until we reach that full measure of the stature of Christ.